Hello and welcome to the MSP Voice webinar series. Today I am pleased to be joined by Gil Vidals from VMRacks. He's going to be talking about their HIPAA Compliant Cloud. So Gil, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
All right, Doug, thanks for inviting me today. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to talking about my passion. Hopefully everyone can see the presentation. If you can, you're looking at a picture of a guy that's not me, but looks just like me back in 1988. And I was working for Morgan Stanley with their mainframe. So in the background, you can see these mainframe computers. And my job, which started at 8 p.m. at night, was to run back and forth with these huge tapes that you see in the picture and then load them into the mainframe. Go back, grab another one. And this was a giant, corporation, Morgan Stanley. Worked from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. and then we had a training class from 8 a.m. to noon. So it was an insane schedule. We were slaves to Morgan Stanley back in the day. So the next slide, I just wanted to show you how I started my passion with computers. It was around 1980, and a neighbor of mine, an engineer, was putting together computers himself. So back in that day, in 1980, you can buy like Commodores and Amigas in magazines, but if you were a serious business guy or an engineer and you wanted a workstation, not for gaming, you had to order all your own parts and bring them in, and he assembled it for me. It cost my dad $5,000. I think I was a junior in high school. He put it together, and what's really funny is when he got it all together and we went to pick it up, it took two people to carry it, and the sides were made out of pine wood. And so it was like an old station wagon with with panels on the side, and that was my first computer. So that's kind of how I got started. Next slide is how I got started in the internet. So in 1994, I moved to California, and there was a program I discovered called WinSock. You get a stack of 12 diskettes from Microsoft, and you put them in there, and this Hayes modem, 1200 baud, would start beeping and buzzing, and 2 minutes later you're connected to the internet. And what did you do back in 1994? Well, you went to Alta Vista, because Alta Vista was the only search engine of the day. Yep. And so that's how I got started. I went to Alta Vista, and I thought to myself, how can I get into Alta Vista? So I figured it out, essentially. And then I started my own company in 97 doing exactly that. Companies would call me and they say, Gil, we want to get into Alta Vista just like you got in. How do you do that? And how much does it cost? So I said, it's $200 a month. I needed some money to pay for food. So I thought $200 a month, and they paid it. And the next guy calls me, and I want to get in Alta Vista too. You did it for my friend Larry, and how can you do it for me? And so I did it for him too. And then he says, how much are you going to charge me? I go, it's $400 for you. So I kept doubling the price until I hit the ceiling, because there was no market for this work in those days. You didn't really compare to competitors. You just made it up as you went. So the business in 1997 was focused mainly on search engine optimization and also some web hosting at the beginning.
Well, so that's like, you're kind of like the SEO pioneer, in looking at it back then, because that was, we didn't even know what Google, Yahoo wasn't even born yet, I don't think.
Yeah, I think Yahoo was around the same time as Alta Vista, but
okay.
In any case, so I started the company in 97, and it was in 2010 where I turned the corner. And the reason was, it was kind of a unusual conversation with my dad. He helped me finance the business to get started.
Okay.
And he said to me one day, you're really basing a lot of your business on these search engines. And of course, by 2010, it was Google we were optimizing for and getting rankings. Our claim to fame, Doug, is that we had the term life insurance as #1. That company in Southern California was making about $500,000 a month for those selling life insurance because of his ranking. And we were making like $3,000 a month. It's like, wow, I was an idiot. I should have been charging him a lot more. But in any case, I had a conversation with my dad one day, and he said, son, your business reminds me of an elephant with a flea on its butt. When that elephant moves, that flea is going to get squashed. And I go, Dad, what do you mean by that? And he says, well, the elephant's Google, and you're the little flea on the butt. And if Google decides to change the algorithm, then your techniques are going to go to the wayside.
Yeah,
And he was right. Around 2000.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people got burned by that, didn't they?
Oh yeah. Well, as some of the audience might know, the SEO industry imploded around that time. Literally imploded, just caved in. And some of those companies moved on. They said, well, we'll do the new social media marketing, whatever they wanted to call it. I decided, it was a tough decision. I said, you know what, I'm going to continue the hosting that I started in the early days. It was a redheaded stepchild, and I decided, you know what, let's pursue that. Let's not do this this SEM business anymore. So in 2010, I had a client of mine that I was hosting call me, and they said, Gil, do you know anything about hosting medical data? And you have to follow HIPAA regulations, federal regulations. And I was just told them, I go, look, I don't know a hippo from a HIPAA. I don't know what that means, but let me research it. So I did a lot of reading, and I called them back and I said, hey, I think I can do this. And we had a good rapport, so they were giving me an opportunity. And the neat thing was, instead of charging peanuts for hosting, they were willing to pay a handsome price because of the security involved and the liability of hosting medical data. So I thought to myself, this is an area we need to focus on. But HIPAA is basically broken down to three areas: administrative controls, physical safeguards, and technical safeguards. So that was what I had to get my mind wrapped around in order to serve that market space.
We had a guest last week, HIPAA for MSPs, and that was one of the conversation points is, can MSPs charge more for their HIPAA clients? And the answer was yes, because the requirements are so much greater. When you're trying to help those companies that have to be HIPAA that have to conform to the standards and those types of things. So just like you said, you're hosting, you could charge more for hosting this data because you had to go through all these extra hoops.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one piece of advice I'd give to the MSPs that are listening is don't compete solely on price. The race to the bottom is an ugly race, and if you win, you lose because you'll go out of business. That's the way it works. So you want to come up with a better formula. For us, it was the HIPAA compliance because that garners a premium. And so what we did though is we wanted to be a value leader, and the reason we wanted to be that is because we were used to using open source. Back in 1997, when we started doing hosting, there weren't really any commercial products out there. You used Apache on a Linux server. Everything was free. So for many years, Doug, we were really used to hosting in a open source environment. We got quite adept at it. And so when we launched the HIPAA and the medical services hosting in 2010, we already had this very inexpensive platform. And yes, we added some commercial licensed software to it as well, but the mixture, the right ingredients, was very helpful in keeping our price to be really low. And so we were able to achieve that, and I think that was very helpful in getting a foothold into the market. So just as an example, in our market space, if you want to get a startup plan, our competitors were offering pricing at about $1,500. Competition heated up, they dropped it to $1,000. Now we have some that are competing between $500 and $1,000, but we can go down as low as $299.
Wow!
So that's a great thing. We're able to keep that price low, and that's an entry. That's it's not a loss leader, I would say, but it's a good way to get those clients. And some of those clients that start off at $299 are paying us over $5,000 a month today. So some of those, I wish a lot of them did that, but there's a percentage that really mushroom, right? And so that's not a bad model for an MSP. It's not a bad model if you can get enough of them to convert.
Yeah.
So Doug, what I want to talk about next a little bit is what sets VMRacks apart. I don't know, you probably know better than I do. How many MSPs are there out there? I always wonder that. Do you have any statistics on that?
Tens of thousands, at least, within the United States. There's probably 10 within a 5 mile radius of anywhere you sit. So.
Wow. Hey, quick tangent, Doug. I heard a really interesting statistic that you could probably do a whole webinar centered around this, but a guy from Forrester just came out with a fascinating statistic. He said that 96% of the IT service companies, which MSPs are under that rubric, he said 96% of them can't scale beyond 10 employees. The average IT service company, 96% of them have eight employees, and they're not able. They want to scale, but they can. And I thought that was fascinating. We're much higher than that employee-wise, so I think that we've done something something right to put us in that 4%. So I asked myself, what are we doing different that sets us apart? So that's kind of what I want to focus on next.
Okay.
The attrition rate for us is less than, or we strive for less than 5%. That's our goal. Okay. By that I mean, how many customers are we losing per year? And so that's our goal. And I think that's a worthwhile goal, because MSPs that have too high of an attrition rate, they become what I call a revolving door. Yeah, your sales guys grab that sale they got from an AdWords link that cost you, $400 to convert that lead, and then, the next day you lose one that you had for a few months. So you're a revolving door. Your profitability never grows, and you're working your butt off. So the attrition, that's one of our main goals at this company, is to keep that attrition rate. And 5% isn't very sexy. I'd like to get it much lower, but at least that's what our eye is focused on, right? That's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
So the question is, well, then how do we do that? One of the ways we're doing it is to use U.S.-based support staff only, and that's not an accident. A lot of the HIPAA regulations call for U.S.-based. And they say in the federal regulations, if you dig into them, they'll say no foreign national should be able to access the medical data for U.S. citizens. Like, okay. So not every MSP is going to want to play that way, but we did, and we saw a big side benefit, and that is that when our customers call, they love it that they can reach us. Whereas when I call a vendor who has overseas staff, they tell me, oh, well, I understand you're having this issue. Our engineer will look at it tonight. And I'm like, tonight? That's because their support staff's who knows where, right? And so the next day I get a ticket. Oh, can you try this? So the cycle for tickets takes forever, because you're talking to some guy on the other side of the world. So I think to keep our attrition rate, the U.S. made in the USA staff has been a key point.
Okay.
The other thing that we're doing, which really made me nervous at the beginning, to be honest, was to offer a 15-minute response time. Okay, that means that the traditional IT service companies, they brag, oh, we'll respond in 24 hours. Or if you open a ticket via chat or email, I'm like, 24 hours? Who knows what's going to happen in 24 hours? So our engineers are equipped to answer in 15 minutes. Now, when I say answer, I don't mean just an autoresponder that says, oh, Larry, I got your ticket, we'll look at it. I don't mean that. I mean a real engineer who's already looking at logs, digging into it. So within 15 minutes, and our clients love that. They're buying pizza for my staff. I see pizza coming all the time. I'm like, wow, what's going on out there, guys? I smell more pepperoni pizza. And that's because they can't believe that they're getting this kind of they can't believe they're getting this kind of support. Yeah. The other thing that we're doing to keep our attrition rate low is first call resolution. So we decided not to really have any tier 1 engineers, because too many times when I call, I get stuck in tier 1 land, and they say, oh, we need to escalate it, and it's go round and round. We thought, what if we just didn't have tier 1 support staff? Just when you call someone, you're on tier 2. And so what that does is that first call resolution is very successful for us. Probably 90% of the time, we don't need to escalate to another engineer. So you're on the phone, when you hang up, the problem's solved.
That's
and
probably
that
that's the reason you get a lot of pizza.
Yeah. And the other thing is to keep the staff happy and healthy. So what I do is I really, and this is not, I don't know, maybe it's not a business thing. It's more of a personal, but I really take an interest in the life of my staff. I try to help them out any way I can, whether it's something involved with the company or not. And, we have some of the traditional things where they're playing ping pong, and I bought we have competitions here. We have a pull-up bar in one of the offices, and we go in there and we do pull-up competitions, and some of these guys couldn't do a single pull-up. And I'm in there, and I'm 55 now, and I'm like, watch this, guys. I'm showing off, and I'm banging out 10, and they're like, what? This old dude can do 10. I can't do 1. So they're in there. They're really struggling, sweating every day, trying to get up to more than I can. So it's a healthy, fun environment where you try to mix it up with the guys. And I think that has led to having a low attrition rate and employee churn. So we're keeping our employees for many, many, many years. Doug, I don't know the industry average. I can't tell you how long a sysadmin normally stays around. I don't know. But I can tell you, our guys are staying around for years, and they get to know the clients by name. So when our clients call, a lot of these guys say, "Oh, hi, Joe. What's going on today?" And then that gives the client a warm, fuzzy feeling. Oh, this guy knows me. I'm not just another, what's your account number, sir? So that's helpful. So the next thing I want to talk about is the what I believe sets us apart is a security model of continual improvements. By that I mean we have a good security model, but we're never resting on our laurels. We're never just sitting around thinking, oh yeah, we're great here at security. So we're always questioning our own security, thinking, how can we improve it? What can we do that will help us have better security? So I kind of want to go through some diagrams,
sure,
and just quickly show an evolution of how to be an MSP with good security. So this next diagram, I'm going to call it security level 1. And some of our competitors actually still implement this style. So in this diagram, you'll see on the left users, right? These are guys, could be your end users, your developers, everyone on the internet is coming through. In this example, this is a Google platform example. We do VMRacks host both in private data centers and Google, and wherever we want. So in this case, Google Cloud, and you'll notice that there's just a firewall, right? There's a Google Cloud firewall, and then below that you'll see web and database server. So again, some of our competitors employ this model, and what makes this model very weak is that the holy grail, the golden egg, is the database, because that's where the important information is. In our case, it's the medical data. It's sitting in that database server. So that database server is sitting at the edge of the internet. Someone knows how to get to it. They have at least a chance to get to it. So again, some of our competitors employ that. The next model, security level, we'll call it security 2. You'll notice what happened here is a simple change where you separate and isolate the database server. So now you have a web server and a database server.
Okay.
So why is that important? Because the database server is pretty much in a DMZ. It's isolated. There's no access through a public IP. You have to have a private IP to get to it. Only the web server could talk to the database server. So if a hacker got into the web server, he hasn't stolen the golden egg yet. He needs to still reach out to the database server to really get the data. So that's a little better. And then next one is security 3 model. Okay. So what we've done in this model is we've interjected a WAF, a web application firewall. Now there are many in the marketplace. You can find your favorite one. But you put that there between the standard firewall and the web server. So now you've got an extra layer of protection. And this diagram doesn't show it, but we've also introduced an IP reputation appliance, which is focused on looking at, basically it's a glorified blacklist, but it knows, having a list of millions and millions of IPs, which IPs are scanning for vulnerabilities, which ones have hackers behind them, and so on. So having an IP reputation appliance alongside the web application firewall is also another layer. Now the security model 4 builds up a little bit more. If you notice at the bottom, we introduced a VPN. Okay. And the reason we've done that is because we don't want the developers, if you notice this is dev team or DevOps team, we don't want those guys having to come in through the normal internet ports, like port 80 and port 43 and then port 22. We don't want to open up extra ports that everyone in the world can access. So what you do instead is as you can see on the lower part of the diagram, you introduce a VPN, and the DevOps team can access and transfer files and look at the database, run queries directly, whatever they need to do. And so now you've segregated things even further by making sure certain ports are completely isolated from, public traffic. So that's another improvement that can be done. Now, I want to pause here for a moment to recognize that this model costs more than the first model where you had everything in one unit, in one server. We had web server and database server, and that little lonely boy. That's a lot cheaper, but again, we're not competing for just price. We want to make sure that the data is secure. That's our primary goal. So this helps in that regard. Now, the final one, this is the mystery. This one says there's an additional improvement that we've made, but I didn't want to reveal it in this diagram. I know hopefully there's some MSPs kind of leaning forward in their chair going, where the heck's this model? But we have a little secret sauce, and that secret sauce incorporates more technology, and it actually makes it. I wish I could show it, but it does make it more affordable and more secure. And usually when you say more affordable, that means you're spending more money. I mean, I'm sorry, when you're saying it's more secure, you're spending more money to make it more secure. In this particular model, that's our secret sauce, we've figured out a way to make it more secure and spend less money. It was one of those unique circumstances where it just worked out that way.
Well, that's great.
So it keeps so we got kind of lucky, I think, on that one. So I think these kind of models that I'm demonstrating here are things that, you know, each MSP has to wrestle with. But I think again, the story or the moral of the story here is don't rest on your laurels. Don't ever think that you've reached the holy grail of security. You never can. And the way you keep evolving that is listen to your staff. Those guys in the front lines, they know. I do a lot of research. I attend other webinars. I'm reading. You know, I'm always looking for things that we can test in-house and bring into our company on a development server and test it out, and then have meetings and say, hey, what do you guys think of this? Is this worthwhile, this technology? And so we're constantly doing that. Now we're not big enough a company to have this official R&D department where you have crew doing that, but we're still, I mean, it still falls under the category of R&D because that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's the last slide I had. Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Just, you know, real quick, in talking about these different levels of security, you know, understanding, you know, we're talking about HIPAA and you know, compliance and all that type of stuff. How much of that? I mean, you know, obviously there's guidelines and you know, and you know, you talked about the technical and the physical and those types of things. How much do these security models play into that HIPAA, you know, compliance aspect of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, very, very few. So when you go out and buy a tool, they'll tell you, oh, buy this tool because it'll help you with HIPAA. I mean, everybody wants to tell you that. But as far as a tool, now there is one tool that I've seen called OpenSCAP, and it's an open source tool that anybody can use. And OpenSCAP will actually query a server, and if you have an agent on the server, it'll come back with a really neat report saying, here's all the regulations on one part of the chart. And it'll say, here's the problem on the server. We found a package that should have been installed and it's not, SE Linux, SE Vault or whatever. And it'll tell you, you can't meet this regulation because it's missing this package. And that's more of a reporting type of tool to let you know where your vulnerabilities. But as far as commercial tools that you can go out and buy, you know, they're all going to be useful in some regard, but there's no silver bullet that says, oh yeah, you install our tool and then now you're going to be compliant for HIPAA across the board. I haven't seen that. Yeah,
and I know, you know, like I said, we talked a little bit about HIPAA last week on one of these, and you know, there's also no HIPAA quote unquote certification. So, you know, if someone says that we're HIPAA certified, it's like, well, there really is no certification, so to speak. The government doesn't certify you as compliant or not. You know, it's more of a, if someone decides to look into your HIPAA compliance, they're going to look and you're either compliant or you're not.
Yeah, well, I can tell you've done your homework because a lot of people don't understand that. They think that high trust is the compliance. We get a lot of phone calls saying, are you high trust certified? I mean, high trust is a good company. I think they're doing good work. I think they're very smart, and they've kind of cornered this market on quote unquote certification. But if you read the government regulations, they'll say there is no company in the United States that certifies HIPAA. They just come right out and tell you. They said this is not about paying for cert. It's all about due diligence. So interesting story. If you have an auditor and you're a health app developer or a medical, you know, hospital, and you have an audit and they find out that your website isn't up to snuff, you could get fined, of course. That's what everybody's fearful of. You can get fined up to $5,000 per patient record, up to $1.5 million. So if you have, here's a funny example. If you have an email that you send out with someone's X-ray, and then someone takes that email and forwards it to somebody else, and that person forwards it to somebody else, that can multiply up to $1.5 million quickly if that email gets sent around.
Yeah.
So that's pretty steep. So yeah, you got to really pay attention to the HIPAA regulations, I think.
Yeah. No, so, just real quick, obviously, you've set up the security model, to be secure and those types of things. What about, from your customers and your clients, do you do any kind of education for them? Is it, in terms of HIPAA compliance, what they're allowed to do, what not to do? How do you handle that aspect?
Yeah, that's a really hard one, because the mind, what's the word I'm looking for? What the customer wants is just to say, look, I hired VMRacks to do this stuff for me and make sure we're compliant, and that's the end. They want to just say we're done. And that's what happens. That's kind of their emotional state, is that, hey, we paid you guys, we're finished. But they don't realize that HIPAA is a business operations regulation. It's not just your website, it's your whole business. So the story I like to tell is you have a developer who decides, he's working on his workstation developing your website code, and he has some patient information he happens to pull up on a screen, and then he decides it's lunchtime and he walks away and he leaves his screens unlocked, and there's a window right there on the first story of the building. People walking by the window can peer in and say, hey, look, there's someone's X-ray on the screen. Well, that's a big HIPAA violation. So that guy didn't have the training. He didn't know, I have to have a screen lock on my machine. I think that's a very simple example, but it shows our clients. I tell that story so they realize, oh, Gil, you and VMRacks, you can't control my staff sitting in my office. I go, no, we can't. You have to train them to be HIPAA aware, get certified, and all that. That's up to you to do. But they're reluctant because it's more hassle and cost, so they don't really want to do that. And the bigger companies embrace it, but the smaller the company is the trend, they want to do less and less of that. The bigger ones have more to lose, so they're willing to do more work. Yeah.
Well, but I mean, even the smaller ones, right? If they get hit with one of those violations, they could be just put out of business right away.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you're right about that. Absolutely.
Great. So, in terms of, people want more information in terms of, your HIPAA compliant cloud and hosting. Where should they go? VMRacks.com?
Yeah, they should go to VMRacks.com. Also, LinkedIn. We've been very proactive with LinkedIn, and we're doing a lot of videos about what we do and how we handle things. So they could always go to LinkedIn and see some of those videos. And we're very easy to get a hold of. I mean, everybody likes to say that, but we literally pick up the phone, people call, and it's easy to get a hold of us. There is a trend in the industry. I think it's noteworthy that there are some companies that are removing all forms of contact. I've run across that more and more recently, where you can't dig in and find a phone number. You can't find email. So we're doing just the opposite. We're saying, look, here's my cell number. Give me a call anytime you want. And so I think that's something else that MSPs should have as a takeaway, is make yourself really reachable. It's a distinction that isn't that hard to do.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I know, if I want to reach somebody, I want to be able to, get a hold of them as soon as possible and not have to try to hunt them down somewhere. So it is nice to be able to have that number and that contact to know who you're getting a hold of.
Yeah, it is definitely.
Great. Well, I'm kind of out of questions. I'm not much Q&A here on the webinar. Anything else you wanna say before we wrap it up here?
Well, I just want to say it's a pleasure to be on here. I like to talk about these topics, and hopefully some of the MSPs that are listening will have some takeaways, and I'd love it if they gave me some comments or I don't know, do you have comments on your webinar when you post it?
Oh yeah, we've got it. Yeah, we have it on the blog, and they can comment on the blog and those types of things, and I'll definitely let you know if there's any that show up, and we keep in touch.
Yeah, that's great. I know you mentioned that we'll be able to post a webinar on our own site, so I'll definitely encourage people to put comments and get some feedback. We're always looking for ways to improve and provide information that's useful to the audience.
Well, great. Well, Gil, I thank you very much for your insightful presentation. Sounds like you're having some good success with your HIPAA compliant cloud and hosting, and wish you more success in the future.
Great, Doug. Thanks a lot. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye then.